Hello, everybody, and thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Well, the big news right now is will the government get shut down because those clowns in Congress can't find somebody to lead them? So are you worried that the government is going to close down? How soon will you miss them?
I'm terrified. I'm stocking up right now on food and water.
Well, I guess you've noticed the TVs, really, they're serious about this. And all the pundits and the military people are saying, you know, we have to do it. This is a tragedy. I mean, we'll lose our credit rating, and how will the soldiers get paid, and this sort of thing. They're really building it up. And that part annoys me to no end because I think that's a farce. When you think about our financial crisis of a few years back, the Fed was able to use about $15 trillion bailing out banks, foreign governments, foreign central banks, and the whole works, and government never slowed up. I think the odds of anybody suffering from this so-called modified close down of government is zero. I can't believe anybody really is going to suffer from it.
Well, you know, it's just like last time. They hype it up, they terrify everyone that the world will end, and then that's how they get the raising the debt ceiling, whatever they really want, that's how they get. The same is going to be true this time.
Well, even the official deficit, when they don't have the limit raised, you find out that the real debt is about $250 billion higher than the debt limit. So they go on and on. They always have ways to get around it. But there's too many black budgets and too much ability for the, the Fed to bail out whomever they like. So I think that's one thing this is used for. But the other thing that bothers me about this whole thing, they don't have a speaker, and why is this occurring? And once again, the liberal bias in the media is saying, well, this is terrible. They're frightened that government will be closed down. And then they'll say it's only because the fiscal conservatives won't compromise. Well, why is it that the burden is 100% on the fiscal conservatives who don't want to budge? And they argue the case, and rightfully so, that they were elected to do this. And from our viewpoint, most of them aren't really cutting the way we would like. But the media puts the blame on these fiscal conservatives willing to close down the government, and in order to keep the world going around, we have to make sure that there is no breakup on this and that there's more spending. So what will that be the solution there? And anybody that understands fiscal affairs and monetary affairs should be very concerned that government continues. So I think these individuals who are in an unusual place where they can make people stop and think about what is the purpose of government, should we be spending this much, they're doing everybody a favor. And I think because there's so much activity on this, I think they're a little bit frightened that government's going to lose credibility, which they are and should.
And that's why the media frames it. I was looking earlier, the media frames it the hardcore conservatives versus the pragmatists. But you look at actual spending, and there really are very few. If hardcore conservative means fiscal conservative, you could probably count them on one hand.
And we have a few friends there that recognize that the military budget is bloated. Yeah. But in this budget proposal, they want to get rid of the austerity, so-called austerity of sequestration, and they want to eliminate there. And Boehner and Pelosi wanted to do that, so that would mean more money spent in the military. And if we were serious that we have a spending problem, yes, there should be work to not compromise, but work together. Why shouldn't the fiscal conservatives work with some progressive Democrats and say, hey, look, why don't we start off by stopping building weapons like the F-35 or something? There are places to do that, but there's no intent to do that. But I think that it's almost a smokescreen. It's serious, and there isn't a speaker, and they're fussing around. But that's sort of a smokescreen to hide, any effort to cut back on spending.
Well, here's how they did it. For example, for example, just in the National Defense Authorization Act this past week, here's how they did it to get around this so-called sequestration, which instead of growing like this, grows like this, the defense budget. They simply put a ton of money in a special war-fighting budget that's off the books.
Right.
So they'll hide a big chunk of money here. But when it comes to spending on useless activities, they haven't pulled back at all. You remember last year they authorized $500 million to train Syrian rebels, and we got about 5 guys out of that. Well, this year they're going to double down and do $600 million for the same project.
No, what are you going to get? 7 fighters then?
And another $700 million to train in Iraq, the Iraqi army. How's that worked out after all these years?
See, my argument is, you mentioned one way they circumvent that and they get the money there, and that's sort of on the books if you search for it. But I think it's even worse than that. I think that, say, the activities can be paid by foreign governments, and they can pay the CIA and provide havens for the CIA. And how could they get money? Well, they can get it through the banking system. They can get it through the Federal Reserve, and all this stuff can be financed, and they do, you know. And they also were expressing deep concern about the Ex-Im Bank. The world would collapse, and if the Ex-Im Bank doesn't subsidize interest rates. But how can you subsidize interest rates when they're 0 or 1%? You know, it's this kind of stuff. But it's, once again, it's control and manipulation. But there is a true impasse, you know, on picking the next guy. But I don't know if this is any more exciting or much different than I was there, you know, when Gingrich was booted, and he had a tough period of time there, and then they finally agreed on a new speaker who lasted 1 day. He had some background problem, yeah. And you know, there's some rumors and insinuations that might be going on now, but I think it's even much deeper than that. I think the country knows, and many members of Congress knows, that they have to at least appease those who think that we have a financial crisis ahead and we should cut back, but there's no intent to do it. They don't really want to cut, but they're at an impasse. How do you satisfy the people who really want to cut and the people who don't want to cut, but they're not getting the support from the people? Because evidently, you know, 40 or 50 guys in there are standing up. If they weren't getting support, they wouldn't be in office, you know, and I think this is a result of at least a token effort by the Tea Party movement to cut back. But that's a different story than picking a guy to get up there and wave the wand and tell people what legislation they can look at. This is the big picture. They don't know how to manage it. It isn't just managing Congress, you know, day-to-day operation. It's how do they manage this monster? You know, the size of government and the efforts in our foreign policy, the management of our monetary policy. I just gave a recent talk, and I talked about the end of an era. And I think the era is ending. And this is sort of symbolic of the era ending, where they're at an impasse and they don't have a solution. So they narrow down, the media loves it, narrows it down. It's because 40 guys are finally going to hold the whole country hostage. That's just so far removed from reality.
And they also have to manage an illusion, which is even more difficult. The GOP especially has to manage the illusion that there really is a difference between the two parties, a substantive difference when it comes to war and finance and these things. So that's why you see the House adrift, I think.
Yeah, you know, I think that's absolutely true, and they talk about bringing groups together. But I've talked about that for a long time, but it's not bringing conservatives who are willing to be liberals and liberals willing to vote for conservative spending like the military together, because that has been the majority of both parties and they've been willing to really share power. But you know, now that they're running out of money and they're facing the serious consequences of this, I think the coalition should be between libertarian conservatives and progressive Democrats who are honest. You know, I get sick and tired of either the conservatives or the liberals who speak a good game, fiscal conservative. Did any Republican ever run for Congress who didn't say they were a fiscal conservative and they were going to cut and then vote for all that stuff? In the same way with Democrats. They're progressive Democrats. I'm against the war and I'm for civil liberties. Then they go in and they get Obama in power, and then they vote for, you know, spying on the American people and Patriot Act and all these things. And those big bills that we've complained about so much were strongly supported, bipartisan bills. So the undermining of liberty has been bipartisan. And I don't think they're concerned about about the majority of those in Congress, but I think there is a fiscal concern. I think how do you manage something that is too big, out of control, and there's really not enough funds? That's, I think, where the real problem is.
See, what you've just been saying sounds pretty attractive to the American people. You know, you don't have to be a member of Congress to be the Speaker of the House, and there are some rumors going around that there's a draft Ron Paul movement.
Yeah, I heard that. I think it's rather silly talk, but it's entertainment. I don't want to be part of the entertainment, but I'll tell you what. I saw something in the news yesterday, I believe it might have been on Drudge, the big announcement that might change anybody's mind that thinks I ought to be Speaker. It says Newt Gingrich is ready to serve. So, and people have short memories. They say, oh yeah, he must have been a good Speaker. We don't remember any problems he had. So, but somebody else suggested, well, Boehner, you know, it looks like we have to keep Boehner around. Nobody else can do the job. So they say, but he's going to resign. I said, that's okay. He won't be in Congress. He can be a member of Congress. I don't know if it ever gets that far where they get somebody out of outside of Congress. That would be interesting. But once again, that's a technical solution, picking and choosing on legislation. But you should be able to throw a monkey wrench in now and then. And I think the most important thing would be if people are serious and you had a nonpartisan person doing that, is be very generous on the votes. But make the votes, you know, an issue. You know, maybe having 30 bills in a day or something. And they'll be short and to the point. It'd be sort of like how they try to sandwich these amendments in on the big bills and make them up and down votes. So a nonpartisan wouldn't be angling, how am I going to stick it to the other party? Mm-hmm. And they just think it's a disaster. You know, a party in Washington never wants to lose the party in charge, never wants to lose a significant vote on a passage. And they will keep it open. One night we were there until 3 in the morning on that.
Blood on the floor.
Yeah, on the prescription drug program, and finally they got it passed. They had to pass, and they weren't going to give up. So that's not going to be the ultimate solution. The ultimate solution for this problem that we face as a nation is for a new generation, including the remnant of those who believe in the free enterprise system and believe in the Constitution, is that what should the role of government be? Should it be that we should have this runaway welfare spending? Should it be that our government can snoop on us and spy on us and lie to us and put us in jail, though if we even hint of lying to the government? But the government's allowed to lie to us, put us into wars. And is that the purpose of a government in a free society? We have to first ask the question before we can get the answer. We do everything along the way, whether it's having good members in Congress or whether you prod and push the Speaker in certain ways, that all can be helpful. But ultimately, this problem cannot be solved until we ask the question. But the question will be asked because we're rushing toward that major collision with reality. Certainly in the monetary financial area, we can't allow this continuation of just printing money, and now the printing of money is done totally in secret and it's passed out in secret. So there's a lot that can be done. But when we ask the question, what should the role of government be, very simply for me is get out of the way, protect liberty, don't tell people how to run their lives, and don't tell people how to spend their money, and don't tell other countries how they ought to run their country. Our goal then should be to set a good standard to the point where others would look to us and want to emulate us. That, to me, would be a much better role for government. And we had hints of that in our early history, but we have forgotten about it. And the last 100 years has been very negative. I'm hoping that this next 100 years will do a lot better. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report, and please come back soon.